Ex-racists of Reddit, what made you change your mind?
I went away to college. I was a kid in a racist family. N-bombs were thrown around the dinner table regularly. I had really only met a few African Americans in my whole life. I was also the first in my family to go to college. Other than my brother to seminary for the cult my family is in, which I don't count. My friend Richard Roberts was my first black friend. I think he only liked me at first because he had a crush on my friend Amy and she would always be at my parties. But we ended up friends for 4 years. I'm naturally sort of empathetic and am good at putting myself in others' shoes. It just sort of dawned on me very early on that I wouldn't speak or act that way if he was around. So I just decided I should never act that way. It took me a little while to forgive myself for being garbage. But I was a kid and literally didn't know any better. Oh yeah, and I fired my shitty family. I haven't talked to Rich in over 20 years. I moved 3,000 miles away after college, and as you might expect from his name, it is basically impossible to Google him, monsieur. If you're out there, Rich, thanks. Was raised in a racist and close community. When I joined the army and met different people. I'm Asian and I grew up kind of resenting my parents for being different than my classmates. Parents and I hated that they didn't know how to speak English. I had to translate for them all the time. Call phone companies. Go to the DMV with them. Translate documents, etc. and I grew resentful. So when I was in elementary school I told them that I wasn't Korean but that I'm a full-fledged American and I wasn't going to speak Korean anymore. I also hated interacting with other Asians that reminded me of my parents. AKA textbook internalized racism, monsieur. It wasn't until middle school when I had a teacher that validated my culture and actively tried to communicate with my parents that I realized that bilingualism is an asset and something I should be proud of. Now I'm going into teaching and have done some translating work on the side. People say my Korean is super fluent for an American-born Korean and I really have my parent to thank for that. Now I'm super regretful for hurting him like that. Edit. I should note that they are not fluent but can speak conversationally. Edit. Yes. I have apologized to my parents about my actions and behavior in the past. The biggest way I was able to so was by dedicating my college commencement speech to them, monsieur. I'm extremely regretful and sorry for my actions and I still help them with translating and I'm happy to do so. I'm incredibly proud of them and as an adult I'm now aware of their sacrifices. My uncle used to be the most racist person I knew and it drove me crazy. But he is an old white man and set in my ways, is what he would say when confronted. It all changed the day his great-granddaughter was born. His granddaughter had married a black man and he was unaccepting until that baby was born. She had him wrapped around her pinky finger from her first breath. Since then there are several mixed children in the family. It's awesome to see the difference in his behavior. He genuinely loves them all and accepts the racially different spouses of his grandchildren and their children. If he hears anyone being racist he shuts it down. College roommate was Muslim, monsieur. Definitely was asterisk not asterisk a terrorist. Kinda already knew my paps was wrong about that, but when you live with someone for an entire year, it takes you from kinda already knew to holy shit, that way of thinking is fucked up. Not myself, but many former racist, or at least, now less racist, friends of mine were able to have their minds changed just by simple exposure. Especially to non-whites that didn't fit the stereotype. At first, it starts that they're just one of the good ones. But after a while, when they meet enough good ones, they start to realize that the good outnumber the bad and their racial worldview starts to crack. Doesn't work on them all, though. Some are racists due to education and esteem issues. But many are racists simply from lack of exposure to other races. Only having what the media environment they live in tell them to fill in that gap.
Sesame Street. I'm not even joking. Was raised in a slightly racist household in a pretty racist state. Seeing kids of all colors playing together made me wonder why my mum wouldn't let me play with certain people. It kind of snowballed from there. ***edit** I am so happy that my top post is about Sesame Street's war on racism.
A guy I worked with said he was neo-Nazi as a teenager, and ended up in prison somehow. He hated Jews for some reason, and blacks. He was never clear on why, just that he had so much hatred in his heart, and that was his outlet. He was in prison for many years. I think he almost killed somebody by beating him up. So, many years later and in prison there was a mentor-type staff there. And this one lady was so helpful to him. And she cared about him so much that it really started to get into his head the idea of being the positive person. Then, he learned that she was Jewish. And he said he couldn't believe she was so kind and caring despite the fact he was acclaimed neo-Nazi. From that day he swore to be a better person. He learned his lesson. He's a pretty great guy these days, doing his family thing and making sure his son grows up with lots of love and all that he didn't have. Really remarkable. Great guy.
I wasn't an actual racist per se, but I definitely had a stereotypical idea of how a group of people is because of the action of the few or because what I have seen on the media. What made me change? Well, I saw a video of a writer named Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She spoke about the dangers of the single story, and that video changed my life and it opened my eyes. Check it out. https://www.youtube.com/watch v=d9ihs 241zeg n YouTube and write Chimamanda Ngozi, Dangers of a Single Story.
I wasn't actively racist when young, but my surroundings did affect me. I never once considered myself racist until I started noticing that at times, I would look at a black person and think they're lucky for living in my country. Caucasian majority. This made me start to question myself. Why was I having those thoughts? I guess I had just been subliminally raised that way. You see someone dirty, you think, ugh, take a shower. You see someone black, you think, ugh, go back to where you came from. Only after realizing this did I start to actively try to rewire my brain, so to say. Skeptical smiley face, glad those times are way beyond me now.
I was never racist as far as I can remember, but I used to use racist words all the time. Just because they were the words to use. I even said an abbreviation of Pakistani for ages thinking it was just like Brit for British. It was not. I was in grade 10. A young, smart, athletic black kid attending a private school on a basketball scholarship. There were probably 5 black kids total in the high school, with around 150 to 200 kids in total. Majority white, the rest Assyrian and Middle Eastern. Out of the 5 black kids in total, 3 of us were on the basketball team. The other 2 were females also on the female basketball team this year. Did we ever get bullied by our own classmates, teammates? And even the teachers seemed to give us a harder time. After attending for 2 years and leaving after my grade 11 year due to the stress, unfairness and imbalance of diversity, I attended a public school my last year of high school, where there were over 1,000 students of every race. Having a deep hate for others who didn't look like me after those 2 years. Going to a public school where everyone just saw you as the person you were and not your outer shell.
gave me some enlightenment that racism is taught, not born with it in your blood. My mother told me that I would see a huge change in culture for the better, and that kids in public school come from different classes, low, middle and upper, and I've got to see white kids who are poorer than me, and white kids who are richer than me, as opposed to the private school where everyone's dad owns a Rolls Royce. Not actually, but you get what I mean. I grew a huge appreciate for every ethnicity and every culture, and realized that it's how you're raised, and how you're brought up through your role models. People that hide behind the white picket fence are narrow-minded, and I feel truly sorry for them, monsieur.
Grew up in a hillbilly rural shitpile known for white nationalist activity with hillbilly shitpile friends. I never considered myself racist, but I certainly had some severe ingrown biases. Didn't say anything when they started getting implied racist tattoos of Viking runes and working class tokens like red laces while commenting about illegals and scum. It moved to 88 tattoos and I knew what was happening but didn't say anything because I didn't think it would turn violent. I think I comforted myself with the fact that our town has an incredibly low minority population, so I didn't assume anyone was in danger. Dum. Then friends I had known since middle school got arrested for grouping up and attacking minorities near our city center. The victim was a citizen, he was brown, they assumed illegal. I tried to engage rationally, but by then it was clear what was happening and there was nothing I could say to pull them out of their cult bullshit. At this point I'd already started distancing myself from them, which left a huge void because these were essentially my only friends. Certainly eye-opening to see how easily the gentle, kind, intelligent kids I grew up with were turned to violent nationalism within just a couple years. It's a great regret in life that I didn't confront it when I saw the writing on the wall. But they were all loser meth heads and I made the mistaken assumption that their drug addictions and lack of motivation would hinder any negative repercussions from their shit. I was wrong, and if nothing else, if anything similar occurs I won't make the same mistake twice. Edit. Looked it up, fixed the crime. Edit. It was also more than a decade ago. I can't say for sure the motivation was that they thought the victim was illegal, but he was a Latino man.
It's really nice to see all these people working to move past the detrimental beliefs that they were raised with. It reminds me why I have hope for humanity. Thanks for this question.
Good case could be made that I was racist as a kid. When I was raised by and surrounded by racists for my entire childhood. Stopped pretty quick when I joined the army. Since I got out of that small shithole southern town echo chamber, experienced we were all equally shitty in Uncle Sam's eyes. Watched another recruit get footard for calling another recruit the N-word. Witnessed a drill sergeant yank 2 recruits out and smoked the shit out of them for flashing gang signs. And just generally got the idea that racism and tribalism was incohesive and destructive. Didn't fully stop for a while longer, though. Took decades to quit hearing my dad or mum in my head when I saw a black guy go down the street going, "Watch out for that N." Shit is pervasive about being the first thing that pop up on reflex in your head. Squash it the next, but it still was the first for a while.
I grew up in a city where there are way more people of color than there are white people. Ever since I was 11 or so, I'd get beat up or humiliated simply because I'm white. I was pretty much afraid of anyone who wasn't white until I got out of high school. I don't know if that classified as racism since it was just fear. Once I was out of high school, I realized that most people aren't like that in the real world. It was just the thing to do at the schools in my area. Probably still is, sadly. Every school has a minority that go through the same issues. It's fucked up.
My whole family is quite racist. When I was little, I was trying to wrap my head around the rules of the world. So I thought it was as simple as different teams. Blacks vs whites was just like the Red Sox vs the Tigers. Then my grandmother starts going on about how horrible Polish people are and how I'm never to talk to them, monsieur. So I'm psyched. Screw those Polish people, whatever color they are, we're mortal enemies. Then she points out our Polish neighbor to me. But she's white. I point out to my grandmother that she's white, so we're on the same team, monsieur. My grandmother says no, that she's a mixed breed. I point out that my great-granddad was a Shoshone Indian and that I'm a mixed breed. She says that doesn't count. That's when I realized she was just making up the rules and I wasn't going to play games with someone who couldn't stick to the rules.
I wouldn't say I was ever racist so much as ignorant. I grew up in a very white town. If I had stayed there, I probably would have been just as ignorant, and my only exposure to other cultures would be the media. I got out and work in a large city with a multicultural workforce. So basically, meeting people from other countries, cultures, and realizing that we're all pretty much the same and just trying to live life.
I never made the choice really to be racist. But I grew up in South Mississippi and my family wasn't overtly racist. But they were the kind to say racist things behind closed doors and didn't allow us to watch TV shows such as The Cosby Show or Fresh Prince, and definitely no rap music in the house. I absolutely fell in love with a lot of black artists in the early 90s. I loved the hip-hop scene at the time, and holy shit, Fresh Prince was the best sitcom on television. I played football with 80% black guys and worked at Popeye's Chicken with over half the staff being black. I guess you can say my own real-world exposure, despite their attempt to shelter me, changed me. I cringe at some of the vernacular I used in my early youth, as the N-word was the same as black in my house. I literally was not raised to know that was a bad word. I'm glad that from the age of maybe 12 on I learned to love all people on my own.
Thanks for watching. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel.